The NFL free agency, we can assume, is over. The Denver Broncos could make a couple more moves, but for the most part, free agency has been set. So Sayre Bedinger and myself, we're going to go through and grade the Denver Broncos free agency moves for the defensive side of the ball, both in-house players and out-of-market free agency players. You get that and much more in today's brand new episode of the Locked On Broncos podcast. Let's ride.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked On Network and 9 News. Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, wherever you get your podcast, free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format. Also here on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. Sayre, my friend, hey, it's great to see you here once again for another episode of the show. Some busy moves ahead as the Broncos now prepare for NFL free agency. Will they move back into round one? I know is a question that everybody wants to know. What will they do, especially at pick number 64? We won't find out until draft night or potentially day 2 of the NFL draft. But until then, we could take a look back at the Broncos' grades here in free agency, my friend. We're going to start off with the in-house options. How you doing, my man? Let's get right into the action right here, right now. One of the key moves, Sayre, Josie Jewell coming back here for the Denver Broncos, signing a 2-year deal and pretty good market value. Broncos getting a bargain out of this contract. Now, initially when this move happened, I think Broncos country had a mixed emotions as to who they were going to hopefully prefer a linebacker. I know everyone's looking at Bobby Wagner, but Josey Jewell is back. So, Sayre, I'm going to write down here on my handy-dandy tablet what grade I'm giving it for the Denver Broncos. When you're ready, go ahead, let me know, and we'll show it at the same exact time. I'm holding it up. Bam! Okay!
Oh, I got
we
some
both got an
3D
A.
letters.
I like it, man. So we both voted as an A here. Sayre, why would you give this a grade A for the Broncos?
You know, I love the price, first of all, especially Josie coming off injury, right? Cody, I think that's the big thing for this move is that you have to consider he's coming off a season-ending pectoral injury. So the Broncos got him at a really, really good price. 2 years, $11 million. When we see a lot of starting linebackers around the NFL, I mean, look at the contract that Myles Jack got from the Pittsburgh Steelers as kind of a reference point. I'm not saying Josey Jewell is as good or as proven as Myles Jack. What I am saying is that you're getting a starting inside linebacker at a fraction of the market value. So, and it's a multi-year deal, which I love. Like we talked on this show, I felt like Josie was going to get a 1-year contract from the Broncos or somebody else. George Paton gets him on a 2-year deal. That means if Josey Jewell, let's say Josie goes out and has 120 tackles, 4 sacks, a couple of picks, a couple of forced fumbles, something like that, then you're getting him next season at the same price pretty much. I mean, at a very low price. I love the risk-reward factor of this move. I just think it's a home run 2-year deal for George Paton and the Broncos.
Well, let's take a look at another player the Broncos brought back. This is one of the exclusive rights free agents that the Broncos had on roster, was a key special teams guy for them last season, P.J. Locke. And look, I have a lot of optimism, Sayre, in P.J. Locke from what I saw from the tape on the preseason for him, his kind of growth and his role that he's found elevated on special teams. The Broncos are bringing him back. I wrote down my grade for this one. I got it as a B+. You got it as a C. Okay, so for those listening on the audio podcast, you can't see, Sayre and I are holding up our tablets or whiteboards here. Sayre, eager for your thoughts. Why is this a C grade in your opinion?
I mean nothing negative by that, right? I think that a C, I just see it as like, this is just like a solid average move. Like, and when I think of B, I think of above average. When I think of A, I think of excellent. I think bringing back P.J. Locke is a pretty average move. It doesn't really move the needle for me. I don't necessarily see him getting reps at the safety position. I know we've kind of differed on that throughout the course of this, since I've joined the podcast, which is great. I think it's fine.
I love it. I'm glad we don't agree on everything, which is great.
I know,
for
right?
sure.
Yeah. And that's one thing, Cody, when you're talking about P.J. Locke, I may not be nodding. So whoever commented that may need to pay attention. If Cody's talking about P.J. Locke, maybe then I won't nod every time you're talking. So I don't mind the move. I don't hate it. I think it's okay. I love having him for depth and, like you said, special teams.
I think that's a fair point that you make, right? I don't think the expectation is that he's going to come in and be the starter, especially considering the fact the Broncos look invested in obviously Caden Stearns and Jamar Johnson, who George Payton invested draft capital in. But for Locke, he'll have an opportunity in training camp to make the team here once again, potentially at safety. Obviously special teams is there, but I think George Payton and this staff are going to look at how can they contribute on both sides, whether it's offense and special teams or defense and special teams. The same applies here to PJ Locke. But let's take a look at another in-house option. The Broncos initially released this player, Sayre, but then they brought him back. And Deshawn Williams here, coming back for the Denver Broncos. I've got my grade ready. You ready to rock and roll?
Ready.
I'm giving it a B. All right, we're in agreement here. We both give this move a B for George Payton and the Broncos. And Sayre, I think the reason I put this as a B, just my perspective here, I really liked what we saw from Deshawn Williams coming up and having a little bit more of an elevated role in the past 2 seasons. He was that presence, too, that was really deflecting passes as well, kind of like Shelby Harris was. So Shelby Harris, obviously no longer part of the Broncos. Could Deshawn Williams step up and maybe replace Shelby at that DN spot while you have DJ Jones on the interior in different packages alongside Draymond? I'm pretty confident in Deshawn Williams right now, Sayre.
I am as well, Cody. I think he's coming off a really good season, and he's been a valuable depth piece for them. Whether that's even just been pushing other guys in practices, right? Like Deshawn Williams has kind of been that guy, even dating back to his time with the Cincinnati Bengals, just kind of like not quite there to be an every down NFL defensive starter or maybe even a rotational guy, but also too good to just like, you can't just keep this guy on your practice squad.
Yeah.
Like he's going to make an impact for you. So I think the Broncos put him in a great role this past year. And I'm with you. I think that maybe he does step into the Shelby Harris role and you slide DJ Jones down into that interior, the one technique or the zero or whatever, because he can do that. And I think that Deshawn Williams gives you 3 guys up front that have some really nice athleticism and quickness off the ball. I think that's a solid B move, very above average for the price, especially getting a guy to come back and be part of your rotation.
I love that. And I know you and I both really like this guy. I'll be eager to see what our grades are for it. But Jonas Griffith was an exclusive rights free agent. The Broncos, George Payton said, hey, we want to bring him back as well. I thought his impact late in the season for the Broncos at linebacker was especially important considering some of the guys banged up like Kenny Young. We saw some flashes. You really saw his athleticism fly off the tape. I've got my grade ready if you are.
Yes.
The Jonas Griffith bring back. Hey, there we go. We are similar here. B plus here for the Denver Broncos. Sayre, I touched on a lot. What is the reason you gave this a B plus grade?
Look, I was really critical about this trade early on. I felt like, man, like I don't like the idea of trading draft assets, like actual draft picks for a guy that's supposed to play special teams. Like I felt like the Broncos were utilizing draft capital to cover up for the inability of Tom McMahon and his unit to really coach things up. But over the course of time, we see that it wasn't just a move for special teams. Like the Broncos, they may have discovered because of a lot of injuries, but they may have discovered one way or another that this guy has some starting chops at inside linebacker in the NFL. With Baron Browning's move to the edge, Cody, I can't help but wonder, is Jonas Griffith going to be that other guy? So I think this is touching on the A with the context of the trade being a really good trade at the time and an exclusive rights free agent. So this is some great foresight from George Payton to get a guy who, you've got him under team control for a couple years and he'll be a restricted free agent next year. So that's a 3rd season. The Broncos will be able to get him at a good price. I think this is a solid B plus for me because the jury's out. Can he be a starter?
We are all about roster building here. We're very forward thinking in that regard here. So next, coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Broncos, Sayre and I, we're going to take a look at George Payton's external free agency moves. And keep in mind, we want to know what grades you give the Broncos in-house free agents that we listed: Josie Jewell, PJ Locke, Deshawn Williams, and Jonas Griffith. Let us know in the comment section down below. But before we get into the external moves here, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. That is our good friends over there, betonline.net. After months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national champion this coming weekend. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting needs and sports info. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it, BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we jump into the second half action on today's episode of Lockdown Broncos, we're going to take a look at George Paton's external moves in NFL free agency. Just want to say thank you so much, Broncos country, for your continued support and your interaction here on the podcast. Both Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we appreciate you so much all across Broncos country. Mile high salute to you. Now, Sayre, taking a look at the Broncos free agency moves from the external market, a couple of big signings initially early on. I feel like we'll add the Russell Wilson one to there in just a moment. I feel like everyone's going to give that an A+. I know various outlets have given it an A+. So I guess we could touch on that there. But I want to look at free agency signings here. And what was one of the first big free agency moves that the Broncos made, minus the trade for Russell Wilson? It was bringing in Randy Gregory from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, at first, I think I met this move with some skepticism in a sense that, what are the Broncos' plans? They're going to bring in another edge rusher. And I said I wasn't a fan of the move unless they did that. Well, now we've come to find out Baron Browning will play a little bit more of that rotation at edge in certain positions. So maybe that's the Broncos addressing that. Maybe they can still look in free agency a little bit later on down the road here. I've got my grade here for the Randy Gregory signing, Sayre. I gave it an A-. Sayre gives it a B. Now, Sayre, give me your thought process and your thinking on this one. For me, initially, I probably had it as a B move or a B+, and then I started thinking about it. If he can be the impact player that he has put on tape and he can stay healthy, this has a chance to become an A+ move if, in fact, it all pans out. But that's a lot of ifs, man. We don't play the ifs games too much, but we like to kind of look ahead and hope. But then again, hope is not a strategy in football, so I'm kind of contradicting myself there. Why did you give it a B?
Well, I think that's a great point too, Cody. It's like hope is a big part of this, right? You're hoping that Randy Gregory can be the guy that, they think he can be based on the tape that they saw from this past season, especially they're believing that Randy Gregory is going to have a bigger impact on games. This is why I graded it a B personally, because the Broncos front office is banking on Randy Gregory having a bigger impact in the pass rush than either Chandler Jones or Von Miller. And that's going to be the context of this move until proven otherwise, right? Because those are the guys that George Paton passed on in order to sign Randy Gregory. And maybe it was age, maybe it was something else. Maybe the Broncos really weren't that involved with Von Miller or Chandler Jones, but they could have gotten in with either of those guys, would be my assumption. They could have probably signed either of them if they would have wanted them. That is why, for me, right now, I'm putting this as a B, because I feel like all of us going into free agency figured it was Von Miller, Chandler Jones, and then after that, it's kind of like consolation area. Well, the Broncos decided that Randy Gregory was the top prize. So their line of thinking was way different than mine, which is fine. That's okay. I'm just reserving that A+ grade because I think Randy Gregory has A+ potential. He always has. But now it's like we need to see that on the field because now you've chosen him over these other star pass rushers.
I think that's a very fair point that you make too. And I feel like I'm being a little too generous with my grades here. And I don't want to come across as the too generous guy. But then again, like as a former teacher, I never wanted to see my students fail, right? So I always do whatever I can to kind of boost them up a little bit. So I'm doing that same thing here on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Sayre, I don't know how you feel about this next one, but for the Broncos, this was really one of the first moves that they've made to kind of push the needle against stopping the run, which was an area of concern for them last year. Bringing in DJ Jones from the San Francisco 49ers, who is a force on the defensive interior. When we talk about tackles for a loss, impact, being able to shed double teams and creating it to where pass rushers on the outside can get home. He was a big part of San Francisco's defensive success in the last couple of seasons. I'm giving this an A. You're giving it an A as well. Are we on the same line of thinking here? I mean, everything that I just named about DJ Jones, that's really how I feel about him. I love what I see on tape from him. I think he could probably be one of the most underrated pickups of NFL free agency in the entire league. From a defensive standpoint, I think his impact for Denver will be significant if they are very successful in 2022.
I think so too. I think we're on the same page about this. We had talked about DJ Jones on a previous podcast when we were looking at potential targets for the Denver Broncos on the defensive line. And are there guys with bigger names out there? Sure. But after the Shelby Harris trade, especially, the Shelby Harris trade, it's the Russell Wilson trade. Shelby Harris was involved in that trade, right? So he went back to Seattle. I feel like after that trade happened, Cody, I was very open-minded about what the Broncos could do to fill that void on the defensive line, whether that was, a DJ Jones or somebody else in free agency. I think DJ Jones is about as good as you could have asked for in terms of his ability to stop the run. We know that, next level stats, next gen stats, Pro Football Focus, they all love this pickup for the Broncos because of his run stopping abilities. And I think he's got some untapped pass rush potential as well. So I think in terms of my brand of free agency, a young guy, a team-friendly contract, 3 years, $30 million. He's going to start for you. He's got upside. That is totally on brand for me. That's an A free agency grade from me, Cody.
I think that's spot on there. Well, let's talk about the next move. And we're still kind of staying in the realm here of the San Francisco 49ers. The Broncos' depth at the nickel position was one of the key things. And, obviously, major congratulations to Nate Hairston, who signed a deal with the Minnesota Vikings to reunite with Ed Donatil. He's going to have an elevated role inside that defense. They're super happy for him. He was a very under-the-radar guy. In my opinion, I'm like, how come the Broncos didn't bring him back? Because I know that he and Coach Christian Parker could have done a lot of special work together. And he gives you that other option because it seems like right now, I don't think the Broncos are going to make any other moves here at nickel. I think that they're done making moves right now. At least that's how it feels, considering the fact that now draft focus has become the strategy here for the Broncos organization. We're already past wave 3 of the free agency period, but they go out and they sign K'Wan Williams of the San Francisco 49ers. And we talked about the injury concerns from Bryce Callahan. K'Wan Williams was also a guy coming into it that had a little bit of an injury history as well in terms of being banged up. And obviously the Lockdown 49ers told us that, he gets banged up. Be prepared for him to miss some games here. This is a move where I think it'll excel for the Broncos in their predominantly zone scheme that they'll probably run here. But I'm a little worried about the durability. However, I think if he can play to the efficient level that we've seen from him on tape in legitimately the first 5 to 12 yards of the open field, I think it'll be a good pickup. I'm giving this one a B. You're giving it a B as well. Why do you give this one a B grade?
I think this is just a solid move, right? It's not like the Broncos went out and signed Stephon Gilmore or anything like that. They didn't make a big needle moving type of move here at the cornerback position, but at the same time, very solid. K'Wan Williams, a veteran who's going to come in and provide some stability at that position. I do think they still need to add some more depth. I know we're past kind of the initial waves of free agency, but maybe that means guys' prices are going to go down. So I love a good bargain. So maybe the Broncos find another bargain. Nate Hairston would have been nice to bring back. Bryce Callahan still out there. Maybe Nate Hairston being in Minnesota, Cody, maybe that bodes well for Bryce Callahan potentially returning to the Broncos at some point. We'll see. But I just like this move. I feel like I'm giving it a B because I feel like it's a little incomplete, right? I feel like the depth is there if everybody can stay healthy and you've got a good trio. And then OJ Mudia is kind of like a fourth wild card out there. I like it. I don't necessarily love it, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of where I'm at on this signing. And I think K'Wan Williams is a solid pickup for George Paton and the Broncos.
And one thing we can't wait to see if we were very close on our grades or if we were very wrong on our grades. And obviously, if we're wrong, feel free to come back and roast us in the comment section. We're open to being accountable for some of our things and some of the takes that we have. We appreciate that, Broncos country. We have one more signing that we'll get to coming up here in just a moment. Plus, we'll take a look at remaining holes that the Broncos may need to address before the season starts or during training camp or the NFL draft. You get that coming up here in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about rockauto.com. If you need anything for your vehicle, rockauto.com has everything. Why should you have to spend 30%, 50%, or 100% more for parts that you can get cheaper elsewhere? Why go to a local chain auto parts store or car dealership and order parts that the salesperson only orders from the warehouse they only carrying limited brands with higher prices? That's not good for the customer. RockAuto.com has you covered, and they have prices that are always reliably low, whether you are a professional or whether you're a do-it-yourselfer. And they have everything you could be looking for your vehicle, whether it's brake parts, tail lamp, motor oil, or even a brand new engine. They have you covered at rockauto.com. So go see all the parts available for your car, truck based on year, make, model. You get to choose the brand, specifications, and even the prices you prefer. So go to rockauto.com right now to see all the parts available for your car, truck, right? Lockdown Broncos. And there, how did you hear about us box so that they know that we sent you? Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode of Lockdown Broncos, we have one more free agency move grade to give out here. And then we're going to take a look at a couple of the remaining holes here for the Broncos defense going into 2022. Sayre, let's talk about Alex Singleton. Was one of the linebacker additions coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles for him, back-to-back leading tackler for the Eagles. and their defense. I mean, obviously, we know George Paton and the scouts have watched a lot of tape here. However, just watching his tape, you don't get the vibe that he's going to be starter material for the Broncos, though Nathaniel Hackett did say at the league meetings that, he's looking forward to seeing the locks flying around on the field. They call him Goldilocks, obviously, with the long hair there. We'll see how that goes, but primarily, I've always viewed this as kind of like a special teams depth, and if you need a guy to kind of rotate in at linebacker, he might be a serviceable option. However, I don't expect him to start all 17 games for this Broncos team. I'm giving it a C grade. You're giving it a C minus. Mine's average. Yours is a little bit below average there. I think it's fair at that point too. And I think a majority of Broncos country will agree. We had one guy in the YouTube comment section who was just like, this is the best signing ever in Broncos jersey. I don't know if that is Alex Singleton's burner account. But Harold, my man, you gotta tone it down a little bit on our YouTube comment section, brother. We appreciate you. We appreciate you like Alex Singleton, but it wasn't an A+ signing. Sayre, why do you have it as a C minus?
To me, Cody, I'm the same way. I view this as a really good signing for special teams, and I think that that's where my ceiling is at with it. Like, to me, my question is this, especially for the person that loves Alex Singleton, right? Why were the Eagles not willing to re-sign him for the price the Broncos got him, which was just over $1 million? Like, we talked about Josey Jewell being a bargain at $5.5 million per year on the average annual value. So Alex Singleton at just over $1.1 million plus some incentives as well. I don't know. That money talks a lot of times in free agency. The Broncos had plenty of cash on hand. They have plenty of cap space. It wasn't like they pulled the Jacksonville Jaguars and went out there and said, we scouted Alex Singleton and we know he's going to be great, so we're going to give him the same deal or more than Josey Jewell. I mean, he's coming off back-to-back 100-plus tackle seasons. That's respectable. But why were the Eagles, who need linebacker help, not willing to re-sign him? That's my big question with this. And maybe the Broncos just know something that we don't. And I think you and I would agree, based on what we've seen, it's not a move that really I'm excited about at the middle linebacker position. I feel like a Bobby Wagner signing would really get me pumped up about the inside linebacker spot with Josie, and I think a lot of Broncos fans. But for me, if Alex Singleton is your presumptive starter going into 2022 next to Josie Jewell, I'm a bit disappointed by that. That's my view on it. So I know that's harsh, but I'm willing to be proven wrong by that. Again, like with the Jonas Griffith move, I'm willing to be proven wrong.
And look, I think that's one thing that's good about, our approach at least, right? I don't think everybody's as open to being wrong. Like, hey, I'm not going to be right. And I don't ever want to be like, I know everything. I'm always right about everything. I never want to ever come across the way. If I ever do, if you see me in public, smack me somebody, please. Like, Sayre, smack me if I ever come across a pompous like that. I don't want to be right on everything. Oh, man. Outside of that, I'm not a fan and kind of just believing that I have all the answers. That's why it's like, hey, we analyze the game. We're going to be right. Sometimes we're going to be wrong, but it's not like, hey, let's take a victory lap when we're right and let's hide it when we're wrong. Hey, this is open accountability. I've been wrong a million times, and you know what? I'm going to be wrong a million times more. We'll see about that there in terms of maybe how this Alex Singleton signing works for the Broncos. But let's talk about some of the remaining needs here on defense. We got a little bit of a rapid fire here, Sayre. I think one of the things, too, kind of evident as day. You alluded to it earlier when we were talking about K'Wan Williams. I think the Broncos still need to add another nickel corner here because now you have K'Wan Williams, his backup in the nickel, or when he's going to play in the dime, he'll likely start in the dime. Right now is going to be a Sayre Bassey, who the Broncos have familiarity with. However, that's a little bit of a risk at this point, considering what we know in terms of Sayre Bassey being a young guy and obviously not having as much experience, though his experience on the field when he was on back in 2020, I thought was pretty impressive for the most part. He has a lot of room to grow as a player. But if you lose one of those guys, guess what? You need another nickel guy that can play in there. That could be Michael Ojemudia, but I think that his value can be that hybrid safety, that dime backer, and also play an outside corner if you really need to move some guys around. I still think that Denver's one injury away from still being in trouble at that position. I would love for Bryce Callahan at this point to return.
I would love it as well, Cody. You and I are on the same page with that. And I think as every day goes by, the price continues to go down. And now that Nate Hairston is in Minnesota, I feel like, the Ed Donato connection, that may still be there for the Vikings. But I think for the Denver Broncos, I feel like that's an easy way to say, all right, look, they got Nate Hairston. They brought him in. You come back and be that guy with us that you can play in the dime. You can play on the outside if we need you to. Maybe he does a little bit of what Kareem Jackson does. I don't know. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe you use those as recruiting pitches to get him back in the building.
What about strong safety now? Obviously, Kareem Jackson more than likely not returning to the Broncos unless something drastic changes at this point. I mean, I think the writing is kind of on the wall there. Caden Stearns, we're prepared for him to go into the season as the starter. However, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to a big time splash move if the Broncos can find a way to make it happen.
I would love to see it, Cody. Tyron Matthew. We're talking about it until he's off the table,
Yes.
right? That's the thing. I'd
17-0 until we ain't.
17-0 till we ain't. That's what I'm talking about. And as bad as the Chiefs' offseason has been, it would make it even worse for Tyron Matthew, the heart and soul of their defense, to come and play alongside Justin Simmons in Denver with renewed championship hopes. That would change the game for everybody. I think Tyron Matthew, the most recent rumors that I've heard, Cody, is that he's kind of holding out for he wants that bigger contract, and I don't know if there's a team out there that's going to give it to him. The safety market has kind of dried up. The teams that really needed safeties, they moved on, so I would love to see him sign in Denver.
Well, let's go to the final position here. I still think the Broncos need to make a little bit of a move at edge rusher. Not necessarily someone that's going to come in and be a starter, but somebody who has the potential. Like if you need them to start, they can do a really good job of it. And what better way than an in-house option that came over last year? I'm talking about Stephen Weatherly. At this point, he's still a free agent to my knowledge. Sayre, he hasn't been picked up by any team. He came in and I thought he did a really good job setting the edge and also getting after the quarterback for the Broncos last season. Lost contain a couple of times, but that's normal for the edge rusher position. His impact was especially big, especially coming off the week where the Broncos traded away Von Miller and they went on to play the Dallas Cowboys. Both he and Jonathan Cooper on the edge, they were a force against that Cowboys offense. Stephen Weatherly would be one of those underrated moves. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the Jeremiah Tauchu move. Remember, he was initially on the Broncos in 2019, and we were wondering what the Broncos were going to do. They initially brought him back in 2020. Then he went on to Chicago in 2021. I think Stephen Weatherly could find his boots on the ground here once again in Denver on a one-year deal.
And I would like that move. I think that would also free up, the potential for the Broncos to maybe trade a guy like Malik Reed off the edge and say, look, we'll get you to a better situation. So I think that's a good opportunity for them to really fortify that depth, get somebody in with experience. He can play in a four-man front, Cody. He can play with his hand in the ground. He can play standing up. I like the versatility that Weatherly brings, and we know teams that are, Super Bowl contenders, actual Super Bowl contending teams, they always seem to get one of those ring-chasing pass rushers every year. Like last year, it was Justin Houston going to the Baltimore Ravens. And in years prior, we've seen that from plenty of other teams. So I think that the Broncos could be, if an edge rusher is still sitting out there after the draft, like a big name that might still be out there, watch for the Broncos as a potential landing spot to say, hey, maybe we'll give you like $500,000 per sack or something like that. And that kind of a deal could really help this team come playoff time.
Nothing would surprise me if the Broncos still made a big splash at this point of the dead part of NFL free agency where all the major deals are done for the most part. Sayre, Broncos country, let us know what you thought of our in-house grades on the free agents that the Broncos retained and also the free agents that they brought in. Write your grades on those players down below in the YouTube comment section or tweet us on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Lockdown Broncos. And if you're a brand new viewer, you love today's episode of the show, or you love listening to it, make sure you hit that subscribe or follow button, free and available everywhere you get your podcasts in audio format, or watch us here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. What's to come? We're going to take a look at the Broncos offensive moves in NFL free agency. You get that on tomorrow's episode and much more. Broncos country, mile high salute from Sayre Bedinger and myself. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.